I'm very happy actually to present the immersive sound installation titled LÍMEN VIII. The thing is that the whole conceptual background of cycle of works that I have been working on, let's say for the past 5 years, that are all titled Limen, comes from the inspirational thought of the anthropological theory of Arnold van Gennep, that published a book of rite of passage back in the 20th century. The interesting point is that Arnold van Gennep actually structured the term liminal as liminal, and it comes back from limen, which is actually a Latin word for threshold or for a passageway. What inspired me the most about reading his book is practically this kind of analysis and very structurally kind of, presented, let's say, different types of cultures. How do they approach towards this kind of passageway between certain state, or let's say that when a persona goes through kind of a transitional period to adulthood. So the interesting part of it is that there's a variety of cultures who have a different approach towards it. Sometimes the passageway between, let's say, the first personality and then the second one, which is kind of then accepted within their society, can take a longer time than from some other culture. Let's say sometimes this transitional period could be a lifetime. Sometimes it could be just, a tribal ritual or something else. But an interesting part of it is that this kind of transitional period or this kind of liminality also refers to the internet phenomena of liminal spaces. Liminal spaces, you see, they're kind of, thresholds or abandoned residential buildings, areas, corridors, hallways, underground pathways, or even shopping malls, or even office buildings. All these spaces, have a certain initial purpose. And their initial purpose is to serve as a space crowded with people. Now just imagine, we keep the spaces, but we take their initial purpose away. So we lose their crowds, we lose the people that are kind of visiting the spaces, and all of a sudden the spaces become abandoned. Like what makes it abandonment? And this kind of, also passageway or this kind of transition between one state, so which is established with crowd, and the other state, which is completely empty space, what changes between the two? You see, there's even two phenomena that were established that were also reported by individuals that experience the spaces that are kind of, structured with two terms. So, you see, when individuals visited such abandoned areas for the first time, they reported certain emotional and memory responses to spaces themselves. These responses are related to two terms. And these two terms are mostly, let's say, anemoia, which indicates nostalgia or excitement of a time that you never lived in. So, for instance, when we listen music from previous centuries or music from certain decades that we weren't born yet or something, there's always this kind of nostalgic feeling that we can re-experience, so that puts it in a certain position, that we think that we can relive it through the artwork itself. But you see, there's also the second phenomena, which is kenopsia, which practically describes a particular psychophysiological response of the individual who visited such a space or that had interacted with the liminal space. And it gives it a certain airy atmosphere, something that really makes us experience or makes us feel something, that is a bit out of the order of normal, let's say, emotional responses that we have. We could say that liminal spaces enable us to experience both of the phenomena. But what is the most important thing is, this kind of the whole drive and this whole investigation of the phenomena and the whole this kind of threshold and passageway and everything brought me now to create like really variety of works and to kind of translate this kind of threshold and this kind of passageway from anthropological term into a sonical representation of it. Let's put it this way. When we have two instruments, each of the instruments has their own acoustical specifics. Let's say certain harmonics are stronger, certain harmonics are weaker, and so on. And this gives the instrument its own color. But when we combine two instruments together, we can always search for the meeting points of these harmonics together. So let's say that instrument 1 and instrument 2, they have meeting points where they meet, and they can really enable a certain colorful synthesis between them. This synthesis itself then, in this particular case, represents a specific, this kind of liminal kind of space and connection, or the transition between the instruments, where they meet, they are together, but both of them, they have their own personality. The same concept could be reapplied, let's say, to electroacoustic world of music. For instance, that we have a conventional instrument with preparations. There becomes already this kind of depersonalization or alienation of the instrument itself, so that there are references that remind of something else. But if we put it in the context that this instrument includes live electronics plus tape plus everything else, the whole transitional space between different types of acoustics becomes the liminality itself. So this could be reapplied also to, let's say it happened in one of the orchestra pieces that I wrote, that the transitional period of, well, it was more of a spiritual matter, that the representation of an electric kettle as a soloist with the orchestra represented the ascension of the body and soul of the Jesus Christ. So let's say that when you have these conceptual things, that a kettle can represent the transitional period or this kind of transitional thought of a spiritual matter only with steaming something, or let's say the water into the thin air, becomes already again in a sense depersonalization or alienation between the two, so between the orchestra and the kettle itself. But nevertheless, like, there's the whole cycle of works that applied this kind of background and this kind of anthropological influence on them, and you know, it really represents big part of my work for the past 5 years. In the installation, so in LÍMEN VIII, you see, you will encounter again this 3 kind of states of the process of the transitioning itself. So for instance, you know, we need to understand that Van Gennep actually structured these 3 stages of development. The direct relation, let's say, to this kind of stages of preliminal, liminal, and post-liminal state also kind of applies to the installation that you're going to be hearing in the event itself. Preliminality, let me explain it this way, includes a certain metaphorical deviation of the present state and forms a minimalistic and repetitive sonic environment throughout the immersive sound installation. So the specialization, the concert intends to present the first mutation of a sonic material that initially reveals the sound of an extensive improvisations with an electroacoustic guitar that gradually evolves and makes a sense of sequential development. You see, like, all these improvisations that I was doing, they had a pre-structured harmonical progression. So let's say that when we start at a certain this preliminal stage, we go then to the liminality itself. So the liminality itself has a sense of, identity change and transitions through a destructive progression of the viable sounds of microprocessors. What do you mean with microprocessors? Microprocessors in this particular sense refer to interferences between the frequencies or beatings with microtonal changes. But the sonic environment of the liminality seems, organically fluid and transitions into the third stage of the LΥMEN VIII itself. The third stage is post-liminality. You see, that presents a fine spectral interpolation and spectral mutation between the specialization and the E-bound sounds. Overall, it feels somehow static, let's say from the harmonical perspective or sound and macroform point of view. But the specialization, so this reapplied movement of sound, enables it to come to life and to arouse a new sonic identity as the transition formed its purpose and existence.